Welcome to Figma Fundamentals.
This is a use case for layout grids. Layout grids can be applied to only frames, which means you have to select a frame for a device and then you can use as many layout grids you want on a frame. Each of those grids can also be selected and pasted onto other frames since they act like a property. Let's see how we can create a layout grid. I will select a frame first. For example, iPhone 8. Once I select the frame, I can see that we can add the layout grid from here. If I select add, I can change this grid to a row or a column. And I can keep adding them on. I can add multiple grids. So let's select a row. And I can also change the color for this row so that I can distinguish between them. I can also change the opacity so that it's easier to view. This is a quick tip for the different types of grids. On to baseline grids. Baseline grids are horizontal and vertical guides for your text so that it's consistent. These appear as visual aids in your design, spanning the width of your design and repeated vertically at an even interval. In many 8-point grid systems, a 4-point baseline is used. For example, let's start by selecting our size and the number of rows we want for our designs. I will select 100 and change this to a row and also increase the opacity. And now here at the cutter, if you put a 0, it will show you as a baseline grid. And this is how you get your baseline grids.
Components. This is a very good feature in Figma, reused across design files and makes changes very quickly possible. Let me show you how you can create a component. I will first create a rectangle here and add some text to it. Let's name this one primary. You can change these features from the property panel. I'll change this to a different color here and also change the text color to a white and add some round button. Now we can create a component by just selecting this whole structure and right-clicking and then do a create component. Once you do that, you can see this sign here which shows that this is a component, and under this component I have the text and the rectangle. This is how you create a component. Now if you want to create an instance from the component which is just an occurrence similar to this component, let's do a Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V. That will create a new instance. I will create a few more instances. Now that we have few more instances, let's see how we can use these components. So the cool thing about a component is that if you want to make changes on large scale, if you change the color of the component, it will change all the instances created from this component, which is very useful for web design or other design files. But you can also change only one instance, which will not influence or impact the master component or any other instances. So if you need to override some of the properties from the main component, you can always do that. Overrides allow users to make variations on the original component. If by accident you delete this component, it's very easy to restore a component. Go back to your instance and from the properties panel you can see you can have an option to restore the component which will bring back your primary button, the component that you initially created. On this screen I have created 4 different variations: normal, pressed, focused and disabled for 2 primary and secondary buttons. where these two are the only master components and these are just the instances. Now, it's also very easy to do an instance swapping. What is that? For example, if you see this button here says this is a part of the secondary, right? But for example, I need to change this to a different format. We have a primary, so let's choose this one, and we can see that it changes to a primary button. This is how we can swap any buttons to another instance. Constraints. It allows you to fix elements to the frame. If you set your constraints correctly, your design will scale to fit any screen size. Let me go ahead and show you how you can do that. Here I have a frame and I have a status bar. Let me grab this status bar and try to add to my frame. Now you can see that the status bar does not completely align with the frame. When I expand this, you notice that these icons are not aligned to the right side of the frame. That is something I do not want. Let me redo this. How can I do that using constraints? On the properties panel, you can see that you have an option to change constraints. From the constraints panel, you can change the constraint of these icons to a right and a center. Then when you expand the status bar, you will see that these are aligned to the right side. What happens if you use just a normal resize? If you do a normal resize, it goes out of proportion. So we are not going to do that. We can use a shortcut K on Windows. If you select that, you see that your image is always in proportion and it does not look very bad when you expand it in your frame.
Let's talk about masks. This is a feature which shows specific portions of other layers. The outline mask uses outline of the shape used as the mask. Let's see an example. Here I have just a shape, ellipse, and an image. If we, for example, want to use this circle as a mask, we can simply do that by right-clicking and then selecting Use as Mask. Now you can see that once I do that, here a mask group is created, but this image is outside of that group. So the first thing we need to do is select this image and include it into the mask group. Once we do that, we can select the image and move it over the mask shape. And now we see that we are only able to see the image directly over the mask. Here is a quick tip on how to add multiple images for different frames. Say for example, I have 3 different frames here and I want to use different images for each of them. You can do that very easily. If you go to File and Place Image, and then you select the images that you want to add. Say for example, I select 3 images here. And then when I do a open, you see there is this cursor which shows me there are 3 selected images. So when I click on each of them, it adds 3 different images, the ones you have selected. We will talk about clipping content. This feature is useful if you have components with repeated elements that you may want to reveal when resized. Let's see an example. Here I have a framework. I will show you how step by step to create a clipping content. I'm taking a frame here. I will copy this file and make a few copies of these. Once I have some of the copies, I'll just select these 3 components and arrange them vertically. We also have to make sure that the constraints are correctly set up. Now, for example, within the frame, resize the frame we see that this content is clipped. So you can use this feature here, clipping content, to simply resize the component to reveal the number of rows you need. Just make sure that you have set up the constraints for all the elements within your component first.
Thank you for watching. I hope it helped and you enjoyed the video.